I'm going to call the meeting to order and ask councillors to please turn your electronic devices to silent. Vibrate mode is another option, and ensure they're properly signed into the system. So would you all properly sign into the system? And I'm going to call on Councillor Junkin for the land acknowledgement statement. Councillor Junkin.
We begin this meeting by acknowledging that the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee and the Anishinaabe peoples, many of whom continue to live and work here today. This territory is covered by the Upper Canada Treaties and is within the lands protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. Today, this gathering place is home to many First Nation, Métis, and Inuit peoples, and acknowledging reminds us that our great standard of living in Niagara is directly related to the resources and friendship of the Indigenous people.
Thank you, Councillor Junkin. I'll now call on Councillor Greenwood for our time of reflection.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Members, take a moment to look around the room at all present. In this moment, sharing in the experience of dedicating themselves to improving the lives of the people in Niagara. In this room, there are many challenging debates, moments of tension, of ideological division, but we have more in common than we have differences. We share the same spectrum of potential for care, compassion, and the love for our community. Let us root our policy-making process in the values that are relevant to all in our community so that we may work together for a better Niagara. If we could please keep in our thoughts and prayers all the families and friends of those in New Zealand and the 50 people who perished in that disaster. Thank you. Thank you.
We'll now have the Singing O Canada, and Councillor Greenwood has kindly consented to lead us.
O Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love, in awesome land, with glowing hearts we see thee rise, a true north, strong and free. From far and wide, O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. God keep our land glorious and free. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
Thank you. You all sounded in very good voice today. We must adopt the agenda now. Are there any items to be added to the agenda that you have before us? Or are there any changes? Okay, I get a mover and seconder to adopt the agenda. And Councillor Kiokio and Councillor Diodati have moved and seconded. All in favor. Motion is carried. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest? Councillor Diodati.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I have a conflict on CST 14-2019 because I am a board member of NRBN.
Thank you. Councillor Height.
Yes, I have a conflict on minute item 4.1 in the Planning and Economic Development, which I declared at committee. My daughter works for and manages an LCBO, and this deals with wine sales to become public in public places versus the LCBO, so I declared a conflict.
Thank you, Councillor Height. There are no presentations, and so we'll have the chair's report, announcements, and remarks. And The first thing I want to report to you is that we are in extra innings now, and it is still no score in the Blue Jays game with Detroit Tigers. I know you're all interested in that, as are the people of the regional municipality of Niagara. The Government of Canada just released its federal budget and their impacts to pharmacare, financial aid to workers, and support for seniors, and more. As it relates to municipalities, it supports municipalities' local infrastructure priorities by proposing a one-time top-up of $2.2 billion through the federal gas tax fund that will double the government's commitment to municipalities in 2018 and 2019. There are also historic investments in infrastructure, including the National Housing Strategy, which is designed to assist Canadians in finding a safe and affordable place to call home. I look forward to seeing the impacts of this budget on Niagara and trust that our residents will see the results they're looking for, and our staff will be informing us as we go along as to what that impact would be on the regional municipality itself and on the residents of the area. Earlier this month, a delegation from Niagara was in Red Deer, Alberta, to accept the flag and cauldron of the Canada Games, which will be coming to the region in 2021. Summer Games are unifying the region around something we can all rally around, exposing more people to Niagara and what we have to offer. I'm excited for the opportunity to show a larger audience what Niagara is all about, and hopefully we continue to encourage tourists to return in the future. I wish to say on behalf of the various people who traveled to Red Deer, Alberta, that we were treated very nicely by the people there. The hospitality was outstanding. We were able to learn about how they had organized and operated their games. They gave us both the pluses and minuses in terms of advice on what we might do 4 years later. So it was extremely well done. The final ceremony had a flag being passed along to us, and on your behalf, I had to receive the flag and wave it appropriately, along with Doug Hamilton, who, of course, is very instrumental in bringing the games to Niagara, and all of those of you who were in the previous council who worked hard to have the games here. I think we're looking forward with anticipation to them just 4 years hence. Also on Monday, I joined Niagara Centre MP Vance Badaway along with members of council and staff as he announced almost $6 million for new builds in Welland on behalf of the Minister of Families, Children and Social Development, Jean-Yves Duclos. The construction is scheduled to wrap up in the spring of 2020, will house roughly 50 families. I must say it was quite a nice site to have in the city of Welland itself. I hope we can continue to work with the federal government to ensure valuable investments continue to be made in our housing projects as we perform our duty as council to ensure all residents have a place to call home. I can report I also attended a meeting along with the Niagara Centre MP Vance Badaway regarding the Mid-Peninsula Corridor, specifically the impacts on our economy, our infrastructure, and our residents. This was held in Port Colborne as well. The host was Mayor Steele, who not only provided warm hospitality in terms of his kind words, but also refreshments, which were, and I should report to Councillor Dart butter tarts, which were very well received by those who were there, all because of Councillor Steele. Also I attended the Empty Bowls event in support of Bethlehem Housing and Support Services. Many here are supporters of Empty Bowls, an event that is held each year. The initiative by Bethlehem Housing and Support Services aims to help end homelessness and reduce the impact of poverty across the Niagara region. As we continue to face challenges in Niagara regarding homelessness and meeting service needs for these residents, I hope we can continue to work alongside our agencies and community partners to collaborate toward a greater quality of life for our most vulnerable residents. And now water. I joined as well along our partners, the Niagara Health System and Brock University, as they announced their new initiative for better health and well-being. Their goals are to increase opportunities to improve the overall health and well-being in Niagara and also create training and employment opportunities for Brock students and graduates. I'm pleased to see the benefits that come from this partnership, and the region supports any plan to improve the overall health of residents and create new opportunities for young people. We had two top hat ceremonies. The first in good old Port Colborne. Again, Mayor Steele being the host on that particular occasion, and we had the opportunity to be present there on that occasion, and the top hat was presented. That is at the south end of the Welland Canal, and that was last Friday. And then on Monday, I was in St. Catharines along with the Mayor of St. Catharines as the top hat was presented once again to one of the captains on the ship. So the Welland Canal is alive and well, and we noted at the time that while it may be an inconvenience from time to time when the bridge is up, it is also a convenient excuse for being late for various events. So there was a balancing of that. There was much humor, but there was much serious discussion of the very positive impact the Welland Canal has, and the St. Lawrence Seaway as a whole, on Niagara and our province and our country. I also attended Mayor Senzik's State of the City address, where the mayor shared his optimism about the future for St. Catharines. I know that our region can help build upon the momentum that St. Catharines has created and continue the positive changes and development that has taken place over the past few years. And previous to that, I had the opportunity to attend the Southern Mayors, and again, the warm hospitality there was something to behold. And for those of you who think that the people of the south end of Niagara don't have more challenges, there was the usual snowstorm at the other end. None in St. Catharines, but there was one in good old Fort Erie.
It was just a warm welcome, Chair.
And the mayor said it was a warm welcome, and he's right. I also had the opportunity to tour the recycling center in Niagara Falls with Public Works, and I was impressed by the staff and their strong work ethic in ensuring we have a positive environmental impact on Niagara by reducing waste in our landfills. I also gave a brief address at the Building Niagara Together conference held by the Niagara Chamber Partnership about working together to improve services and the quality of life for Niagara residents. Ian Hamilton, President and CEO of the Hamilton Port Authority, was present to speak about intermodal transportation and how the City of Hamilton has leveraged their port for the benefit of an entire community. Moving forward, we need to continue to build on the successes of our team while the region works with local municipalities on plans to deliver an enhanced transit system for the entire region. Also, and there were other councillors who were present at the time, and when you start naming names, you're in trouble. But I also attended the Niagara Industrial Association annual general meeting, and I think those who are familiar with it know what a wonderful organization it is, how positive it is. I know Councillor Gibson was there, and Councillor Houston was there, and Councillor Bellows joined us as well on that occasion. And representing the City of Niagara Falls, there was a representative of Mayor Diodati on that occasion as well. The Niagara Industrial Association advocates and promotes on behalf of the local industry and addresses issues that inhibit the advancement of local industry. Regional Council will support any initiative that can bolster our manufacturing in Niagara and keep our valuable jobs here locally for residents. By the way, one of the things particularly the folks from Niagara Falls, where it's held, will mention, but across the region, they have a job, it's not a job fair, it's a gathering of all of the folks who are involved with the Niagara Industrial Association. And one of the things that Councillor Dart has mentioned, for instance, about our local industries and businesses, one of the things they found out when they had their exposition and at the convention center, they've had another locations before that, was the number of businesses who found out that there were other businesses in Niagara that could fulfill their needs in terms of both goods and services. So this is a vibrant organization. I know that all of us are supportive of it. Lastly, I want to mention the state of the region is fast approaching on April 3rd, and I will present my inaugural address to the business community. It's critical we continue our efforts to foster partnerships with business and work together as a team for the betterment of the entire Niagara region. Hope this event can allow for greater teamwork and partnership to develop moving forward into 2019. That address, by the way, though it is delivered by the chair of the Niagara region, really represents all of you who are members of regional council and the team here in this building and other buildings who are part of Niagara regional staff. So this is not a Bradley show. This is a presentation for all of you, and I hope to encompass in the speech that theme of teamwork that we are seeing so clearly in this particular council. I did also receive an email today from Jeff Thiessen of Para Sport Ontario, who is working to connect the Niagara community through adapted physical activities and pathways to participation. The Niagara Passport Festival is being held Thursday, April 11 and Friday, April 12 to ensure all members of Niagara's disability community can find a sport or physical activity of their choice. He is sending out a challenge to all municipalities to submit a team for participation in this worthwhile event. Details on the festival will be sent out in tomorrow's councillor correspondence that will include contact information. That I could add a couple other things, but I think that captures much of what has happened. And I'm always pleased, by the way, whenever I attend an event on behalf of the region to see representation from those of you who are regional councillors. It really does make a huge difference when you're able to be part of that team on any occasion. And I invite all of you, whenever there's a regional event, to feel free to join me on any of those occasions. Now I'm going to, are there any changes to the agenda? No, we've got the agenda adopted and there are no delegations. And so I'm now going to, the clerk is informing me that I should call on Councillor DeZero for the motion to adopt the minutes, because we have to adopt the minutes of the Thursday, February 28, 2019.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Moved by myself, seconded by Mayor Bilesma, that the minutes CL 6-2019, being the open session minutes of the Regional Council meeting held on Thursday, February 28, 2019, be adopted.
Thank you, Councillor. Is there a seconder for the motion? Oh, Bilesma, okay, you said that. Any discussion? If not, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? The motion is carried. Now I will be, we'll be looking at 11.11 and 11.12, and I'll call on Councillor Butters for the motion.
Thank you, Chair Bradley. I have a resolution moved by myself, seconded by my friend here, Mayor Junkin, that the items to be received and or referred be dealt with as noted in the council agenda and if issued addendum.
Any discussion? If not, I will call the motion. All in favor? Opposed? The motion is carried. Next for consideration, we have the appointment of community member to Niagara Regional Police Services Board. And I'm going to be saying here that questions, when if any members have questions about the appointed community member, they can provide it. So Councillor Gibson, shall I call on?
Just double check that there's no questions.
Okay, there are no questions. Okay. Let's see, are there members who have been appointed? Ask if any members have any questions about the appointed community member, but let's, we have to know who it is first, don't we?
Well, it's enclosed, that's why. So if there's questions, we need to deal with it enclosed later.
Oh,
But
okay.
if there's no questions, we can proceed.
I see. If there were questions, we'd have to deal with it in closed session. I understand. If not, we will proceed. Other questions that we should go into closed session for? Councillor Easton, do you?
Mr. Chairman, I have a question. However, it's not my intention to mention any names, if that makes a difference.
Okay, please proceed.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, in the past and prior to when I was on council, the area that was most noted as being problematic in regard to the police budget and processes was related to the matter of labor relations. I'm not at all speaking about labor relations as it impacts us from a provincial perspective or what they do in other municipalities, but my question relates to how we manage and govern the local contract. And some of the areas that have been important, and I asked this question of the chief, and so it was done in a public meeting. I was interested to know how many full-time equivalents were related to non-productive hours. So that's sick time and court time and all of that. So my question really is around whether or not in the deliberations related to the community member, we look at specifically at those labor relations skill sets. And if we don't look for them in the community members, then we certainly didn't have a discussion when we assigned counselors to find out whether they had that expertise. So I think it's a fair question to ask how the determination is made around that specific skill set, because it has a huge bearing on costs. If we're not prepared to be forceful in our interpretation and do what management should do, and that is to manage that piece of it very, very carefully and very specifically. That's my question.
There are two members of the council who are on that committee, and I'll ask if either one wishes to ask, or the clerk.
If they want to jump in.
Okay, it would be Councillor Greenwood and Councillor Rigby. We're on that committee, and do you have a response to Councillor Easton's inquiry?
Certainly, the
Councillor Rigby,
sorry,
go ahead.
thank you. I believe I have to stand right now.
Yes, sir.
The discussion and the process was that we received applications from a number of people. They were reduced down to 4, and from that point, discussion was looked at based on the service that they have and experience they've had that we thought would be related to the workings of the police commission. Nowhere were we asked to make sure we had someone from a particular area of expertise. So I think that the committee made the right kind of decision going forward based on the individuals that we had that were reduced down to the number.
Thank you.
And then I understand that dilemma, and I think we're facing a similar dilemma with how we're selecting members on the Conservation Authority, so I certainly make those relationships. However, I'm interested to know then how, what approaches will be taken then to address some of these key matters. If it turns out that there isn't expertise around the table, what mechanisms will be used?
Clerk?
Through you, Chair, just to elaborate on Councillor Rigby's comments, there was a skills matrix that was put together that the candidates were scored upon. One of those specific criteria was knowledge or experience in human resources and labor relations, so it was part of the scoring matrix.
Thank you. Any other questions that can be asked in this reading? If not, I will ask Councillor Gibson for the motion.
Thank you, Chair. I have a resolution moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Dart that report CLK 07-2019 respecting appointment of community member to the Niagara Regional Police Services Board be received, and that the recommendation contained in confidential appendix 1 to report CLK 07-2019 be approved, and that Henry D'Angela be appointed Niagara Police Services Board for the remainder of this term of council, March 28th, 2019 until November the 14th, 2022, or until a successor is appointed.
Thank you, Councillor Gibson. Is there any discussion? If not, I will call the question. All in favor? Opposed? The motion is carried. The next item we're dealing with is the use of Committee Room 4, the Regional Council Anteroom. And I'm going to call on Councillor Ip for the motion. Councillor Ip.
Thank you, Chair. I have a resolution moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Kiokio that correspondence item CL-C08-2019 respecting use of Committee Room 4, Regional Council Anteroom be received, and that Regional Council approve the use of the Council Chamber for standing committee and council meetings that are closed to the public.
Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. The next item we deal with is the Association of Municipalities of Ontario Board of Directors endorsement. I call on Councillor Whalen for the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a resolution before me presented by myself, seconded by Councillor Bilsma, that the correspondence item CLC 23-2019 respecting the Association of Municipalities of Ontario Board of Directors endorsed and be received, and that Council endorse Councillor Robert Foster as a candidate for the Association of Municipalities of Ontario Board of Directors.
Thank you for the motion. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? The motion is carried. We next deal with the vacancy on the Linking Niagara Transit Committee. And I call on Councillor Furtick for the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a resolution moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Wittevin, that the correspondence item CLC 24-2019 respecting a vacancy on the Linking Niagara Transit Committee be received, and that Councillor Sednick be appointed to the Lincoln Niagara Transit Committee effective immediately.
Any discussion? If not, all in favor of the motion? Opposed? The motion is carried. Next item we're dealing with is the appointment to the Waste Management Planning Steering Committee. And I'm calling on Councillor Ugolini for the motion. And he is not here. So would someone like to move this motion? It's going to be Councillor Zalepa. Any
Moved
discussion?
by myself and seconded by Councillor Bosma that the correspondence item CLC 25-2019 respecting the request for appointment to the Waste Management Planning Steering Committee be received, and that Councillor Furtick be appointed to the Waste Management Planning Committee.
Thank you. Any discussion? Yes, Councillor Bilsma.
I just wanted to say that Councillor Ugolini had to drop a ceremonial puck for a charity hockey game, so that's why he was just going to step out, was hoping to be back, so don't hold it against him. He's doing some good work.
We'll not hold it against him. We'll not hold it against Councillor Hyde after I'd recognized Councillor Zalepa either. All's well that ends well this evening. Next, we have, oh yes, I have to call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Next is standing committee appointment. This is CLC 26-2019. Calling on Councillor Hewson for the motion.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to present a resolution moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Steele, that correspondence item CL-C 26-2019 respecting standing committee appointment be received, and that effective immediately, Councillor Witteveen be appointed to the Planning and Economic Development Committee.
Any discussion? If not, all in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. I'm now going to look at the one called the request for appointment to Humberstone Landfill Site Public Liaison Committee. I'll call on Councillor Campion for the motion.
Chair, I've moved by myself, second by Councillor Diodati, the correspondence item CLC 27, 2019, respecting request for appointment to the Humberstone Landfill Site Public Liaison Committee be received, and that Councillor Kyokyo be appointed to the Humberstone Landfill Site Public Liaison Committee. And hopefully somebody talk to Councillor Kyokyo before I make the motion.
Any discussion? If not, all in favor? Opposed? The motion is carried. We now have committee reports. Budget Review Committee of the Whole. Minutes. The recommendation contained in minute item 5.1 was ratified by Council at its meeting held on February 28, 2019. Therefore, the minutes will be approved, save and except for minute item 5.1. I call on Councillor Zalepa for the motion.
Thank you, Chair. I'll move what you just said. I have a seconder by Mayor Bolsma that BRC Committee of the Whole 5/2019 open session minutes of the Budget Review Committee of the Whole meeting held on Thursday, February 28th be received, and the recommendations contained therein be approved, save and except for minute item 5.1.
Any discussion? If not, all in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. We next deal with Committee of the Whole minutes from Thursday, March 7, 2019. I call on Councillor Bilsma for the motion.
Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Foster that the report CO Committee of the Whole 1-2019 being the open session minutes of the Committee of the Whole meeting held on Thursday, March 7, 2019 be received, and the recommendations contained therein be approved.
Thank you. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. We next have the Audit Committee minutes of Monday, March 18, 2019. I call on Councillor Rigby for the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a resolution moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Bellows that report AC 2-2019 being the open session minutes of the Audit Committee meeting held Monday, March 18th, 2019 be received, and the recommendations contained therein be approved.
Any discussion? If not, all in favor? Opposed? The motion is carried. We next deal with the Public Works Committee minutes from Tuesday, March 19, 2019. I call on Councillor Rigby for the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a resolution moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Bellows that report PWC 3/2019 being the open and closed session minutes of the Public Works Committee meeting held on Tuesday, March 19, 2019 be received, and the recommendations contained therein be approved.
Any discussion? If not, all in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. We now have the Public Health and Social Services Committee minutes of Tuesday, March 19, 2019. I call on Councillor Kyokyo for the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a resolution moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Greenwood, that report PHSSC 3-2019 being the open session minutes of the Public Health and Social Services Committee meeting held on Tuesday, March 19, 2019 be received, and the recommendation contained therein be approved.
Any discussion? All in favor? Oh, sorry, I have Councillor Redekop.
You have to watch your monitor, Chair.
Yes.
Item 6.4 in the minutes deals with the Niagara Regional Housing surplus. And there was a resolution that dealt with that surplus in corporate services as well. The resolutions aren't the same, so I don't know what the procedure would be. I prefer the one that was passed in corporate services, but I understand that there's an amendment that's going to be proposed with respect to that. So I need some assistance with respect to how we would deal with these.
I'll call upon the clerk to assist us in this regard.
Through you, Chair, it would have to be dealt with in corporate services.
Well, but we're not in corporate services. So how do we get past this? Do we defer this until after we deal with?
So the motion that's in the public health minutes says that the reallocation be considered.
Right.
And then the actual action to reconsider that allocation is in corporate services.
Okay,
So they're not going to interfere with each other if that's your concern.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Redekop. Next, okay, we have Corporate Services Committee. Oh, okay, I got to call the question. Okay, calling the question, it is on your screen that the report, PHSSC 3-2019, being the open session minutes of the Public Health and Social Services Committee meeting held on Tuesday, March 19, 2019, be received and the recommendations contained therein be approved. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. And next is the Corporate Services Committee minutes we have to deal with from Wednesday, March 20, 2019. I call on Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a resolution moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Edgar that reports CSC 3-2019, being the open session minutes of the Corporate Services Committee that was held on Wednesday, March the 20th, 2019, be received and the recommendations contained therein be approved. Thank you.
Any discussion? Councillor Zalepa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to speak to item 5.1, CSD 21-2019. And I have a question, if I may, through you to the chair. The recommendation was adjusted in the committee report, and this is regarding the surplus funds from regional housing, and that the item of $1.2 million be transferred to the taxpayer relief fund and be allocated for future housing initiatives. My question through the chair is, how does the Niagara Regional Housing, or how would this council, feeling strongly about housing initiatives and working towards initiatives with regards to housing and homelessness, how do we ensure that those funds are used for that purpose, with them kind of being placed in this general taxpayer relief fund? If I could get an answer to that.
Thank you. I'll turn to the CAO, who's going to turn to Mr. Harrison.
Mr. Chair, thank you very much. The motion that was put forward by Corporate Services was that within the reserve, the taxpayer stabilization reserve, that money be set aside within it, and that any future, that it would be dedicated for the initiatives that were outlined in the motion for Niagara Regional Housing and as well as homelessness. To utilize that reserve, there would have to be some sort of report or request that comes to this council for approval to utilize that reserve. The money would never be used without council approval.
Councillor Zalepa, anything further on that?
Thank you for that. I'm somewhat, I guess I'm somewhat conflicted, being that I'm asked to sit on Niagara Regional Housing, and I have a fiduciary responsibility to that organization, and obviously have a fiduciary responsibility to this organization. And I find myself drawn into the potential conflict where I think that I feel, from what I understand, and I understand this is a year-end report, and that we have a policy the region speaks to about the funds, how they're to be dealt with at year-end, and this is the process. I understand that. I guess I'd hate to, I would be concerned if funds that were really designated from other sources, like the province, where some of these funds, as they're outlined in our information, came from the province. I really would be concerned if they're not used for housing and affordable housing issues. And so I'm torn between asking to lift this and wanting to place it back in the amount of the $1.2 million be placed back where this body has placed the care of affordable housing in Niagara, which is Niagara Regional Housing. So I'm really not clear on this. I'm not comfortable with it being where it is, but I respect the fact that we have policy that says that's what you're going to do. I'm not sure if I can get some interpretation from staff on that.
Mr. Harrison.
Without getting into the whole mechanics of our budget process, but basically, normally in these types of cases, as the budget is developed, there's an opportunity for each of the departments, including the ABCs, which would include NRH, Niagara Regional Police, NPCA, to put forward business cases. These business cases are put forward and by the departments within the guidelines that this council would put forward, and we'll be starting that process, and the councillor will be the chair of the budget committee, and we'll be doing that starting sometime this June. Those business cases establish how the use of the funds would be done. And that process would go through vetting through the internal staff, vetting through the finance people to ensure that the business plan is fulsome for any new use of funds. And that would be considered through the budget. At the end of the year, or throughout the year, there is opportunities for budget reallocations or budget amendments that would come forward through the departments that would be considered by corporate services and as well as this council. At the end of the year, the policy clearly states that the surpluses that are generated by the ABCs as well as all of the departments are put into the taxpayer stabilization rate reserve, or the taxpayer levy reserve, sorry. And in this particular case, the monies are set aside for a number of different uses would be based on the decisions of council. In this particular case, a specific motion was to say that we will follow that policy and put it into the taxpayer levy reserve. But there was a caveat to that in the fact that that money, that was that $1.2 million that was related to NRH and homelessness, would not be used for any other purposes except for the reasons that were outlined for the two items. So I think that there's assurance that staff wouldn't spend that money. First of all, we can't utilize the money in the reserve fund without council approval. Secondly, if there's something forward, like I indicated, normally these business cases are brought forward so that they can be considered during the budget process, and that would have to come forward as part of any use of that fund. So that would be brought forward by NRH or by Community Services for the Homelessness Initiative. It should be pointed out that in 2019, the budget that you passed, NRH did change their spending allocation within their budget, and it did exactly this, and they put forward a transfer to reserve that identified the room that was built into their budget, and that was put forward, and you approved that. So some of the requests that you dealt with at the end of the year was already addressed in the 2019 budget, which is the proper process. And just to finalize, Chair, is that we can't we staff can't move forward with the spending or allocation of that reserve without council approval. So that's your assurance.
Councillor Zleppa, that's fine. At least you have had an explanation. I have Councillor Rigby.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think the recommendation of corporate services was attempting to try and resolve it as best they could. There's Niagara Regional Housing is mentioned in there, but we also say a homeless, and I think the homeless piece is under corporate community services. Am I not correct on that? So the two bodies are really could be the beneficiary of that reserve when that time comes. And I have no doubt in my mind they both work together to make sure that we're dealing with both those issues as they go forward. I just wonder if, for clarity, it is indicated that homelessness is under the direction of community service or not. I'm not sure what that was, and I leave it to others as they come forward because I think it's a suggestion. It's very clear, certainly at the community services meetings, and that there was a very strong desire to make sure that that fund was set aside, and that when an opportunity came forward, particularly for Niagara Housing, even if it's to buy some property in order to get something in gear, so that when a fund comes available from the province or from the federal government, that we have something we can move on. And I think we need to keep that in mind when we're having this discussion. Mr. Chair, I would suggest that we lift this item for discussion. And then we can go forward. If there's to be a change in motion, then that can be dealt with at that time. So I'll move that we lift this item.
Does it require a seconder? It's already lifted.
Thank you.
Okay, that's a good suggestion. Thank you, Councillor, very much for that.
Chair, point of clarification.
Sorry?
Point of clarification. Is it the whole item 2 that's being lifted, or just the paragraph that deals with the $1.2 million?
Councillor Rigby?
It is to deal with the 1.2.
The whole motion is lifted? Is, the clerk informs me the whole motion is lifted under that, on that basis. Can we continue with the discussion? And we will with Councillor Sendzik.
Just a further point of clarification. So you're saying it's the whole motion, but the whole motion is point 2. So through to the clerk, we're only dealing with the 1.2 million, or do you want us to split that up and vote on the 600,000, which would be the surplus going to SNP, and then deal with the 1.2 in terms of its allocation? Can I just get some direction, Chair, through to the clerk?
Clerk?
Through you, Chair, the entire motion's on the floor just as if it would be in committee. So if you wanted to amend 2, whether it be the 600,000 or the 1.2 million, we'll call that 2B, I guess, you can do that.
Okay, so let's, if we can, through the Chair, if we could put 2B on the floor, and that would be the 1.2 million, because I think that's the discussion point that really we're focused on right now. So if I can lift that, put it on the floor, and I'd like to make an amendment.
So you have to just say what your amendment is.
Yep, the amendment's going to be that the funds not be transferred to the Taxpayer Relief Fund, that they be kept within Niagara Regional Housing, and also with direction that Niagara Regional Housing continue to work with community services so that the programs that are going to be allocated for that funding be directed towards housing, social housing, and projects that would fall under the community services related to housing issues within the community. So we're still looking for that partnership between community services and regional housing, but it's important that those funds stay within the regional housing envelope, and that's a direction that I think we've heard from both the Niagara Regional Housing, from the Board of Directors as well, and these are funds that should be staying where they originated, and it's not the full amount because 600,000 has been lifted for the SNP program. We're just asking for the 1.2 to stay within regional housing in cooperation with community services. That's a long-winded amendment.
Councillor Butters. Any seconder? You want to second that then? Councillor Butters has seconded your motion. Discussion, Councillor Butters.
Thank you, Chair Bradley. I want to remind Council that when this came up at Public Health Standing Committee, it was supported to park that money in Niagara Regional Housing. For myself, I think that between Commissioner Jugley and the CAO of Niagara Regional Housing, they've shown a great working relationship together, and why we need to kind of stick our fingers in it with something having to come back to this council if it's left in the tax relief reserve doesn't make sense to me. Let the people that do their job well do their job, and that would be Niagara Regional Housing and Commissioner Jugley's department. So I totally support this motion, this amendment, to park that money back with Niagara Regional Housing, just as Mayor Sendzik has described. And to me, that makes perfect sense. There isn't anybody in this room, I don't think, that denies the fact that affordable housing is one of the biggest issues that we face in this term. And so I want to see people be able to do their job effectively, and I think that that's the way to do it. Thank you.
Further discussion? If not, the clerk is going to put on the screen for us that which we'll be voting upon. You now have it on the screen. That clause 2B be amended as follows, that the $1.2 million of the surplus remain in the Niagara Regional Housing budget and be utilized for housing, social housing, and community services housing initiatives. Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One of the discussion points in our community services meeting or corporate services was budget process and when things are decided. And there were specific questions asked of the commissioner concerning the budgets in this particular area. And the executive director also made some commentary during that time of NRH. The problem is we have gone through and we have already approved budget for those particular organizations. So I'm not in favor of just dropping money into that particular situation. I certainly think that we should be making sure that those monies are left available should there be a business case coming back, and that we here at council can make the approval at that point. The money's not going away. What we're basically stating is that council will have final decision on those particular figures when they're coming back in and through. So I'm not in favor of this particular change.
Further discussion or comment from staff?
Thank you, Chair.
Commissioner Harrison.
Thank you, Chair. The concern that I would have with that motion from a budget standpoint is that we're just allocating it to the regional housing budget without any defined spending business case. And that would be contradictory to the budget process that we have here. And so that's the concern. There's not a specific, without any, it's not a specific spend that's been identified. Normally, as I indicated in the budget process, there would be a business case. The proposal that was put forward by corporate services had, while there was an extra step that the business case was developed and it came in front of the council, but there was an actual process put in place. This is just, you know, the way this reads, and I fully understand council's anxiousness to deal with the situation with homelessness and housing. However, it is contradictory to our normal policy where there would be a specific use identified or a business case that would be it would be allocated for.
Commissioner, are you aware of any precedent for this? Any other occasion in which this has been done since you have been in this position?
I was Chair. I'm no longer new here, but I'm not aware personally. Maybe I could send that to the acting CAO or the director, the associate director of finance.
Through the chair, just the subtlety to the difference in the two recommendations that were floored at Corporate Services Committee. The allocation directly to the SNP program was more in line with past practice, where if there was a specific program or there's a specific line item in the budget, that we allocate to that. However, that's why the distinction was made for the 1.2 million, because there wasn't a defined program. So that was to go through the taxpayer relief reserve to then define the program and then allocate the funds. So that was the difference between those two lines, because that is our past practice, is if there's a program defined, then we could allocate. But in this particular case, there wasn't. So there was a distinction with how the recommendation was worded.
Thank you. Councillor Height.
Yes, maybe being here too long and bringing forward some history will embarrass some staff, but over the last number of years I've been here, we've had regional housing, we've had the NRP, and we've had Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority say, we want all that money back. And we've given it back to them. Now we know we can't even take the conservation money, but NRP took their money back, and regional housing. So the fact that we have to put it in a reserve fund at the region, we don't have to do that. Number two, let's put our money where our mouth is. We want more housing. That's one word that's missing on this. It should say new housing. I'm not prepared to accept this amendment unless it says new housing, new social housing and community service initiatives. Not same old, same old. I want to see something new if we're going to invest $1.2 million. And I think that's, whoever made this amendment should be willing to accept that. It's friendly. And we have the right to do whatever we want with our money. It's taxpayers' money. Staff can give us any recommendation they want, folks, but we're the ones that make the decision around here. So when staff say, oh, you can't do that, that's a bunch of bull. We can do what we want.
Okay, that's interesting turn of phrase. Councillor Furtick.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I guess I reflect back in what I said at the corporate services. If it's 2.6 million, yet we're only giving them 1.2. That was my whole point at corporate services. They didn't spend the 2.6. Maybe they might have the allocation in this year to spend 2.6, and yet we're only going to give them 1.2. Now, they were kind enough to run a surplus, which I hope they don't do too often, but obviously there might be a reason there. They should be entitled to 2.6 if you really want my honest opinion about it. So I don't, I'll support that, but I just want it known that if somebody runs a surplus from one year to the next, you're right, we should have the right to carry it forward for the next year. If you did it for Niagara Regional Police, then why wouldn't you do it for everybody else? Thank you.
Councillor Easton.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I think this is a very well-stated motivation for the region to move forward on a housing policy, housing homelessness policy. Clearly, money is needed. I'm not in favor of isolating money. I think that money surpluses should be going into the correct budget so that you have to come forward with a business plan, no question about it. However, I think what this is saying to us is that we need to get busy and develop a housing plan here, a homelessness plan, which we are failing to do. Then we wouldn't have this question, really. We would know where it was going.
Thank you, Councillor. Just a clarification from what Councillor Hyde had to say. He was trying to insert the word new in. Does that mean that what you would suggest is would preclude any rehabilitation to existing housing, or would you consider that to be a new initiative? Because if you say new housing only, it would seem to me that you are then saying, but if they wanted to spend it on rehabilitation of existing housing, Councillor Height, then they would not be able to do so. So I don't know whether Councillor Senzik accepted the so-called friendly amendment or not.
To the chair, that's an accepted amendment.
Mr. Chairman, since I still have the floor.
Yes, Councillor Easton, way to go.
I believe that I'm correct in my memory, although it may not always be 100%.
No, we trust it.
That we have been told by Niagara Regional Housing that their repairs and rehabilitation are actually in quite respectable condition. I'm not going to say it's perfect, but I believe that that was part of their annual report. So I support the new, inserting new in this motion.
Okay. We have any further speakers? And we have on the screen clause 2B be amended as follows: that 1.2 million of the surplus remain in the Niagara Regional Housing budget and be utilized for new housing, new social housing, and new community services housing initiatives. It has been requested a recorded vote. So
Point of order, Chair.
Yes, Mr. Edgar.
What I'd like to know is what happens to our policy. In this case, we're being contrary to policy. So can someone tell me what happens to this policy?
CAO? It's a question, it's being asked.
It's a point of order. I want to know what happened to the policy.
With all due respect, it's not a point of order.
No, I think Councillor Edgar much as I'm sympathetic to the question you're asking, I think that the procedurally, Councillor Redekop is correct, but it's a interesting question nevertheless, I gotta say that. No further discussion? All in favor? Oh yeah, recorded vote. Yeah, she'll tell you when it's open.
Vote is open.
Motion is carried. I'll now call the vote on the motion as amended. A recorded vote is requested as well.
The vote is open.
Through the chair. Just a clarification, Chair. Just clarification, Chair. What are we voting on?
The motion as amended.
Motion as amended.
Okay, I just want to make sure that we're not dealing with the rest of the motion as presented.
The rest of the motion, yes, the motion as amended.
Should we put it up on the screen? Point of order.
Some people didn't vote, yes.
Clarification, because obviously there's no's on there and I don't. What are we voting on?
You're voting. Through you, Chair, you're voting on the motion as amended with the new clause 2.
Can we put the motion up on the screen?
It's on the screen as soon as we clear the vote off.
And then maybe have. Okay, see that through the chair, I wanted to speak to the rest of the motion.
Okay.
So that's why I was wondering what we were voting on, so it'd be helpful to have it on the screen. So if we can open up the speakers list. Sorry, we're gonna have to do a revote on that one because that was ambiguity, there was too much ambiguity there.
Revote.
Councillor Sendek wants to speak to the entire motion.
Councillor said.
Amended it, so now the motion's back on the floor as
The motion's back on the floor, so you can now speak to it. That's right.
Correct. Okay, so sorry for the confusion, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to speak to what would be item number 3 on the surpluses that were for supported programs that were transferred into reserves. And just some clarification, I'm not on corporate services, so I wasn't at the meeting. And just looking for some direction as to the carryovers on these 2.4 million in surplus in the water services be transferred. Those aren't insignificant funds, and it's interesting that we just had a conversation about surpluses from Niagara Regional Housing. These are taxpayers' dollars. So first question is, through the chair, were these estimates built into the 2019 budget? And that'd be the first question I'd have.
Commissioner Harrison?
Yes, in all cases, there's a variety of reasons why the surpluses were generated and wastewater, a deficit was incurred. Those are outlined in the report. I'm trying to draw up the specific instances. We can certainly provide some information as to why that happens, but it's not uncommon that there are surpluses generated in a year, similar to the other areas where perhaps it was revenues that were in excess of what was estimated or expenditures that weren't spent.
So through the chair, again, the question around these were built into the 2019 budget?
No, the surpluses weren't. They're being, because at the time that we had the year end done, which is just recently, we didn't know that the surpluses were going to be generated. So they went into the reserves for use. We have used the reserves in future years. They're available to use in future years.
So I apologize through the chair, because I thought your first answer actually was yes, that you had projected these into the 2019 budget.
No, I apologize because I thought that you were using the estimate but they were estimated in the 2018 approved budget, not the 19 budget.
So through the chair, these surpluses weren't taken into consideration. So as we were deliberating through our budget and the evening of that, where we were dealing with some of the water, wastewater, and the capital reserve, I find it interesting that it was only not even 3 weeks ago that we were deliberating these budgets and staff wasn't able to create a very accurate picture of where the surpluses were coming in. That would be frustrating from me as a counselor who would want to have that information, because we could have reduced our water budget by a certain amount. That would have given taxpayers a bit more of a break on the water budget. Clearly, we weren't given that opportunity because we didn't have what should have been pretty accurate details of what the forecast would be on a surplus. I could be wrong. I wasn't at corporate services, so I do apologize if I'm overstating. But I would just like to, for consideration moving forward, that when we do get to the budget process, that we have better reporting on these type of targets, so that allows us to create a tighter fiscal picture, so that when we're making decisions as a council, if we have to remove or if we have to lower a target because we know we have a surplus coming in, we're not left with, after the fact, allocating these to reserves. Because I believe, what is the water stabilization reserve rate at right now?
Commissioner Harrison?
Through you, Chair.
And then Commissioner, the CAO would like to comment first.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, and Commissioner Harrison will get the specific answer to your question. So the surplus that you're looking at, the reasons for it were all described in the year-end report. I believe that number to be consistent or close to the projection that was provided at the third quarter update to the council. We didn't have final numbers at the budget process, correct? I think it actually largely relates to weather conditions, and we sold more water than we forecasted in what that total volume would be. It is discrete. It has to go back to water where it was generated from those rate customers. Yes, council could have chosen to reduce the budget ask for 19 because of that number. We still would have been, because if you recall from the sustainability presentation in water wastewater services, we still would have in the long term been underfunded for capital investment. So it could have been a decision that council would make. It would not have helped correct or put us better on track with the infrastructure deficit that we have in this utility area.
So through the chair, I don't want to take up too much time. We did, as part of even the water budget, we've at least tried to address closing the gap without the surplus, correct?
That is correct, and it's
okay. So
incremental.
Council has been attempting to do that with staff. What is the water stabilization reserve rate, and what is the water capital reserve? The entire number. Just to give council a flavor for how much is actually in the water stabilization reserve and what's in the water capital reserve.
Through the chair, the recommendation is split so that the point or the 100,000 that is being transferred to the water stabilization reserve is to get it to the maximum limit in the policy, which is $3.4 million. And then the excess beyond that would go to the to the water capital reserve. So that would help with capital because we reached the limit in the water stabilization reserve. And then the water capital reserve is $87 million, and that is earmarked in the capital forecast, and there's still a $70 million a year deficit in the water wastewater capital.
Okay, so just for clarity, it's 87 million is in the reserve. So 87 million, so the public can understand there's a significant amount in the reserve. And then the water stabilization reserve is 3.4 million is what we're trying to get to. Okay, so again, I applaud staff for attempting to build up the reserves, but I would just say we are in March. We should have had these numbers in front of us so we can make a decision, because this council made a decision to invest in the capital water reserve fund, and now we're adding yet more to it, where we could have been left with a decision: do we lower possibly the return to the taxpayer? We weren't given that opportunity. So that's why I wanted to speak to that. I can speak to the encumbrances as well, but I do think we have to do a better job at our budgeting forecasting, so that maybe not on the surpluses, but on some of the encumbrances and some of the projects that we're not getting done or not getting started, and yet we've already taken from the taxpayer to build up for those projects. We have to be mindful of when we're doing that in year and multi-year, And maybe with this budget cycle moving forward, the budget committee will have a full year to look at all those different levers that are taking place, and we can get a better budgeting process moving forward.
Councillor Rigby.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think this is really the result of not having dealt with budget until December and coming forward. And frankly, the previous council had made a decision based on their experience the first term of their council tenure that that previous councilor had already made the decisions on what the budget shall be. So we're on a catch-up position, and I don't think we should be, we will not see the issues that we're looking at today to come this next budget year, because we'll be starting. And I believe it's sometime in June we start the meeting, and we'll be going forward for the next year. So certainly all of the information, and Councillor Sens is quite right. However, I do caution you not to spend those reserves when it comes to capital, because we've got a lot of dollars that are coming at us in the near future that we're going to be needing it. So I think it's important to remember that, is that we're all dealing with a brand new thing here. I think we've tried to bring forward, staff have tried to bring forward the best information they could in a very short term. And I think, frankly, this council has reacted extremely well over it. And have had to take a position and bite the bullet, said, we've got to do this and we're going to do it. And I'm certainly, Mr. Chair, sorry for taking your time.
No,
but because
happy to hear from you.
The hockey game is only a few minutes in, so we'll be able to get at it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Rigby. Any further discussion? I'll turn to the clerk then and say we now vote. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. I'm now going to call the vote on the balance of the recommendations. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. We now go to the Planning and Economic Development Committee minutes, Wednesday, March 20, 2019. I'm going to call on Councillor Houston for the motion.
Thank you, Chair. I have a motion moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Gibson that report PEDC 3-2019 being the open session minutes of the Planning and Economic Development Committee meeting held on Wednesday, March the 20th, 2019, be received and the recommendations contained therein be approved.
Any discussion? Councillor Height.
Yes, through to the clerk, under the new rules of the Government of Ontario declaring a conflict of interest, do I declare a conflict and have item 4.1 separated and voted on separately? Or can I vote on the whole motion now that I've formally declared my conflict? How does it work? And that way everyone can know how it works from going forward.
Clerk?
Or maybe legal wants to answer that, I'm not sure, but clerk's looking to legal, so I need an answer on how to deal with this.
So through the chair, the only rule that has changed with respect to conflict is now, in addition to your verbal declaration, you provide a written declaration. So you should otherwise conduct yourself in the same manner that you would have otherwise. So if you've declared a conflict and you wish to abstain from voting, then you can lift the matter so that you can continue to vote on the rest of the items.
Then if that's the case, can I have 4.1 dealt with separately so I can declare my conflict and not vote on that issue?
We will do that. Councillor Campion.
And thanks, Chair. This is probably not the appropriate time, but I do want to lift item 10.1 in the minutes, PDS 15-2019. I know that's a in-camera item, so I just want to make sure that I get that pulled for the in-camera session.
Okay. The clerk is going to explain.
Through you, Chair. So we'll go ahead and vote on minute item 4.1 separately, and we'll vote on the balance, save and accept 10.2 or 10.1. And we'll deal with that after closed.
Any discussion? Okay, we're voting on minute item number 4.1, modernizing wine sales in Ontario. That the regional chair be directed to send a letter to the province of Ontario in support of the recommendations outlined in the presentation respecting modernizing wine sales in Ontario. All in favor? Opposed? The motion is carried. Now watch your screen. And now we'll be voting on that report, PEDC-3 2019, being the open session minutes of the Planning and Economic Development Committee meeting held on Wednesday, March 20, 2019, be received and the recommendations contained therein be approved, save and accept minute item 10.1 and 4.1. Councillor Rigby.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We had a report on providing for economic development initiatives and a plan going forward, which I think set a very good groundwork and procedural as they go forward with the new plan. While we received it, Councillor Senzik was indicating some vision that he was a bit disappointed with there. And I've been thinking about this since that meeting. I think that's our job to have the vision and that we could take the groundwork that we have and then start to work on the vision as a council or as a committee or however we do it. Sorry. Well, it's helpful to have the expertise in economic development give us groundwork and abilities to do things. I think it's our responsibility to take a look at what is the vision we want to go forward with, how do we go about it, work with our staff to do it. So I just put that in as a comment and as we go forward. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I see no further comment. Therefore, all in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. And the next is the Chief Administrative Officer's report or reports, CAO 1-2019, memorandum from RTRIP, Acting Chief Administrative Officer, dated March 28, 2019, respecting Chief Administrative Officer recruitment options. I call on Councillor Redekop for the motion.
Thank you, Chair. I move, seconded by Councillor Height, that report CAO 01-2019 respecting CAO recruitment options be received for information.
Very good. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. The next is 13.2, a memorandum from RTRIP, Acting Chief Administrative Officer, dated March 28, 2019, respecting provincial review of regional government. I'll call on Councillor Senzik for the motion.
Motion to be received, moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Gibson.
Any discussion? Councillor Redekop.
Chair, I just want to make a correction. The Town of Fort actually received and supported this resolution. I checked the minutes to make sure I hadn't missed anything, but in fact, if the clerk of the town sent something suggesting it was only received, it was actually received and supported.
Thank you for that clarification. Any more discussion? If not, all in favor?
Sorry, Chair, likewise with Welland.
Likewise with Welland, we hear. That's been noted. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Now, the next item we're dealing with is the meeting time for the Public Health and Social Services Committee. Councillor Greenwood.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Kiokio. Whereas Section 22.2 of Niagara Region Procedural Bylaw provides that standing committees shall meet on the days and times according to the schedule set annually and approved by council. Whereas on December the 13th, 2018, Regional Council approved the 2019 legislative schedule of regular meetings. Whereas in accordance with the legislative schedule of regular meetings, the Public Health and Social Services Committee meetings are held on Tuesdays at 1 p.m. Whereas the Public Health and Social Services Committee co-chairs wish to reconsider the time of Public Health and Social Services Committee meetings. Now therefore be it resolved that effective immediately, Public Health and Social Services Committee meetings be held on Tuesdays at 2 p.m.
Thank you very much, Councillor. This is a reconsideration, requires 2/3 to pass before the items can be discussed and considered. So this does require 2/3. So I'll call that. So do we have 2/3 majority? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. So we have the 2/3, so we can discuss it. Now I'll ask for any who may wish to elaborate or offer opinions on this. No one? Okay, I'll put the motion. All in favor? Opposed? The motion is carried.
Thank you.
Next, are there any notices of motion? Is there any other business limited to announcements? Anyone have any local announcements or anything we should know? So next we would have a motion for a closed session. So, okay, I'm going to go to this. If the council and committee minutes and were adopted in their entirety, then those items cannot be, okay.
So they need to go in on the planning item, so if you can just, we do need to go into close, and that's the motion you need to read out, so we need to move into.
Very good. I need a motion that this committee do now move into closed session for the purpose of receiving information of a confidential nature respecting a matter respecting litigation or potential litigation, appeal to the local planning appeal tribunal for Welland Committee of Adjustment decision on minor variance A01 2019 37 Niagara Street, City of Welland. Moved by Councillor Hewson, seconded by Councillor Bellows. All in favor? Okay, we can now, we're going into closed session, so we're awaiting the Back. We have a mover and seconder for that which we see on the screen. Is that a new mover and seconder then? Correct. Okay, Councillor Steele is moving it, and seconding it is Councillor Bellows, which you see on your screen. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. And next,
We have the bills.
next we'll have the bylaws. And we were calling on Councillor Vidovine for the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a resolution moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Greenwood, that bill bylaws 2019-32 to 2019-37 be now read and do pass.
Bill, I have to say that Bill 20-36 needs to be voted on separately as it requires 2/3 to pass it as a procedural bylaw amendment. So we will do, first of all, the
Bill 36.
36. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Now the remainder of the bylaws. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. And there appears to be no further business, except we have Councillor Greenwood wishes to speak. Councillor Greenwood.
Well, first of all, I have to apologize. I was probably talking when other business came up, and I didn't hear it. And I just want to mention something very quickly. And there may be a couple of other people that may have been talking too, because I think they've missed it as well. Anyway, we had a very interesting gentleman at our Rotary Club, and I just wanted to talk about it because it has something to do with rowing. Councillor Rigby? Rowing. This gentleman that came to our Rotary Club, his name was Jeremiah Brown, and if you ever get an opportunity to read his book, he's the only person who has ever won a medal, and he won a silver medal in the rowing in the Olympics in Great Britain, and he had only been rowing for 4 years. When he was 19, he saw it on TV. He was going to university, and he decided, I think I'd like to row. It was the most interesting conversation, and he spoke for about half an hour, and it was absolutely amazing. So if you have an opportunity, look it up, Jeremiah Brown, and he speaks now all over the country with respect to what he has done, and he's written a book. But anyway, just thought I'd let you know that.
Thank you very much for that information. Councillor Gale.
Chair, I understand this is the first time the meeting's probably going to be done at 8:35 or so, and I guess I should be standing, sorry. And I busted my butt to get here from the United Way dinner, and my wife thinks I'm here, so now I have a free ticket to do whatever I want because you're going to call the meeting closed soon. So I just wanted to get on the video and say, hi, honey, I am here. Because she's probably thinking something wrong here. So
Drinks are on Bob.
Done. Well, how'd you guys get done so early? Maybe because I wasn't here, eh? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gale, and to Mrs. Gale, wherever you may be, he's here. That's all the business. Thank you very much, folks, for being here. Meeting adjourned. That's good news. They lost today in extra innings.